What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Phightin Words with Anthony SanFilippo. I am Bob Wankel. Our first episode, a new show, Anthony, to kick off the 2025 season. And everything that you used to know about our podcast and the other show is now here. It looks a little different. It looks a little bit more polished. And that's what you get when you're part of the Russ Joy or the Joy Media Network, man. And it's hard for me. Like he officiated your wedding. I've been good friends with Russ for 8 years now. I consider him a good friend. Don't tell him I said that. But it's I gotta kind of give it to him. It's a nice setup he's got over here, and I don't like to pay Russ compliments.
No, I know. I hate paying Russ compliments, but it is what it is. It's he does some things well. Broken clock is right twice a day. Russ is right on a couple things in his life, and one of them is how to run a podcasting network. And we are thrilled to have Phightin Words here on Joy Media, and we are, just so everybody knows, we are doing the first episode here as a pre-recorded episode because we needed an extra 24 hours for YouTube to allow us to go live because we set up the new YouTube page, right? We forgot to take into account the extra 24 hours that's required. So first episode's pre-recorded, but starting Friday, when we do the show following the opener against the Washington Nationals on Thursday, we will be live on YouTube. So we will be able to interact with our listeners and take their comments and questions live as well. So, but Bob, today, and we waited to do it, it's normally going to be a Monday, Friday show, but we waited to do it Tuesday for two reasons. One, I was not available yesterday, but two, we wanted to make sure that we got the episode in after the Phillies finalized their opening day roster, which came to fruition yesterday afternoon with some decisions that were made. And I figured, that would be a good place to start today. Let's kind of dive into what this roster looks like, who got the last couple of jobs. Are you surprised by a few things? Obviously Suarez going on the IL and everybody's favorite Taijuan Walker in the rotation. So let's just dive into it, Bob. Where do you want to start? Pick a guy, pick a topic about the roster, and let's look at it here as we enter the 2025 season.
Did you see Dave Dombrowski's comment that the lineup construction is an overrated talking point? I wanted
to get to that because to me, that's the most asinine comment I've ever heard.
And to me, I was excited to read that an elevated baseball mind such as Dave Dombrowski agrees with me that this lineup talk is just so played.
Yeah. Well, it is. And see, I agree with that.
We're going to start a brand new podcast. It's the first thing we're going to talk about. By the way, if you go back 7 years ago or whatever it was, the start of the 2018 season when we started Crossed Up, first thing that we were talking about was Gabe Kapler, and is this going to work? And is this guy too goofy? And why did he pull out Aaron Nola after that start in Atlanta? Like, that's how long we've been doing this. But we're going to start this show talking about lineup construction. Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, rotating the top of the order. In all honesty, I agree with Dave's overall premise that this does get a little bit – we focus on this a little too much, but I do think that this is a conversation worth having, so let's have it.
Yeah, and I do agree that we focus too much on the lineup, but to make it to be so dismissive of lineup construction as relatively irrelevant or non-significant, however what the exact wording was, that's where I think it's baloney. Because if that's the case, just bat Bryce Harper ninth. Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter where you bat these guys. Doesn't make a difference. So there is something to it. So let's not be completely dismissive of it. But yes, do we focus too much on the lineup? We do.
Well, what I find interesting, and your colleague Tim Kelly talked about this on Pattison, he pointed out that there's been some inconsistencies from the Phillies, from Rob specifically, about the top of the order and rolling out one lineup at the top. Now, the bottom half, hey, you're going to tweak things, you're going to platoon when necessary, you're going to whatever. At the top, though, there was this idea that, hey, we might tinker at the top. We might use multiple guys. And then that was offered back in January. You get to the beginning of spring training. They sort of kind of downplayed that. Like, we're not going to do that. And now here we are. As spring training closes out, we see a lot of Kyle Schwarber back at the top of the lineup. I know that Trey Turner finished there in the final game on Monday. But it seems like we're sort of leaning into this situation where both of these players, at least early on, might share time in the leadoff spot. And so I think that the conversation of, hey, I prefer the speedy guy and or I prefer the guy that has a higher on base percentage. There's only so much you can say about it in terms of your preference of who leads off. But what about just the idea of both players situationally, depending on the split, taking turns leading off? I mean, what do you think about that? I got to tell you, I'm not a fan, and there's multiple reasons why, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan either, because I don't see if you don't think that Trey Turner is the right option at all times to lead off, then he shouldn't lead off in any situation. Because Kyle Schwarber has proven to be a successful leadoff hitter in all situations. So why are we taking something that is proven to be successful and only changing it sometimes for a guy to be put in a spot that has never really had a great track record in that spot to begin with? So that's why I don't like the idea of only doing it half-assed.
So Kyle Schwarber had a 366 on base percentage last year, and Trey Turner had a 338 on base percentage last year. Obviously, Kyle Schwarber's on base skills are superior to Trey Turner's at this point, based on recent evidence of what we've seen. Do you think that a lot of this talk about Trey Turner going to leadoff is the Phillies almost trying to force his hand to stylistically change his approach? That there has been, obvious gaps, recurring gaps in his swing, in his approach, and that, hey, this is a way to sort of bear down now and make you change who you are, who you've been over the past 2 years. And I guess my question to you then off of that is there something to that? And then what do you think that Trey Turner's level of buy-in is, not about necessarily hitting leadoff, but actually altering that approach to maybe fit the mold of a leadoff hitter more?
That's a great question, Bob. And what I think is I think if you go back to October when they were eliminated and the postseason debrief with Dombrowski and Thompson, and they talked about and they didn't identify Turner specifically, but they said some guys are going to be have to be willing to change their approach when they were talking about lineup construction at the time. Obviously, they were talking about Trey Turner. And now you come into camp, and it was kind of a storyline coming into the start of spring training 6 weeks ago, and then you saw a lot of Trey Turner leading off. But as it got down to the end, you started to see more of Kyle Schwarber leading off too. And maybe the thought is Trey's not where we need him to be in that adapting their approach to what we need. And so therefore we have to keep our option open to not have it be Trey Turner. And so we want to keep Schwarber getting those leadoff at bats so he's back into that comfort level.
Based on Trey Turner's spring, that there was some skepticism or concern as March progressed where they said,
yes,
this is the same guy, and he's probably going to heat up at some point and go crazy, and that's going to be awesome. But no, we have not seen that fundamental shift in what we would, or not fundamental shift, but improvements. Pitch recognition, discipline, drawing more. You just don't think that they've seen enough to really be there at this point.
Well, let me ask you, Bob. Just because what my opinion is at this point. But with your untrained eye, are you seeing anything that looks different in the way Trey Turner is approaching at bats at the plate in spring training? No. Did you notice anything different? Because I sure didn't.
Now, if you gave me over-unders across the board on Trey Turner, let's play a game real quick. Trey Turner, 285 batting average this year, over-under.
I'm willing to go slightly over. I think he's a 290 guy. Yeah.
Okay, Trey Turner, 25 and a half home runs this season. These are my numbers, not sports books. Maybe he plays 150 games.
That's a good number. I'll go under, but just slightly.
Okay, I'm going to go over, but just slightly. I have let's say 27. These are my very scientific projections. Trey Turner had a 338 on base percentage last year. His OPS after the break was sub 700. Do you think that Trey Turner will have a 350 or better on base percentage?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Well, then right there, let's stop the conversation, because what you have is a good hitter, okay? A guy that's going to have some pop, a guy that's a very useful and productive major league hitter. but he's not a leadoff guy. You got to get on base. And if that on-base skill is not there, I don't care that he had 295 last year. I do care that he had 338 on-base percentage because he doesn't walk. That's what I care about.
That was the one thing that he did try to do more in spring training, and I think it impacted his consistency in swinging in the bat.
We had this exact same conversation with Castellanos. It was, well, all right, he's gonna be a little bit more conservative in pitch selection, and he's not just gonna wail away at everything. And but now that's gonna change who he is. That's gonna change his DNA as a hitter, and now he's not as impactful. So if we're gonna just get to this let Trey be Trey thing, then let Trey be Trey, but let's not put it under the microscope of him hitting leadoff. And I know everybody wants to talk about, well, he's got 50 stolen base potential, and you don't want Kyle Schwarber clogging up the base pass. I get it. The bottom line is that Kyle Schwarber is not the answer at leadoff for this team. He is not the ideal fit at leadoff. He's a good leadoff hitter. He's done what they've asked him to do, but in a perfect world, Kyle Schwarber is hitting in the middle of this order. The problem is that Bryson Stott has not shown anything about being an impact bat, so you can't start the season with him in the leadoff spot. But Trey Turner is not that guy, and just because he runs, and just because your little league coach put the fast guy at the top of the order when you were 12 years old, or you used to watch players like, I don't know, pick your leadoff guy of the 90s run around and swipe 50 bases. Like, that's just not what the game is anymore. So who cares? You know, the reason we're having this conversation is because the Phillies for years, for what is now the 5th straight year of being competitive, forget about the 10 prior years beyond that, this is yet another year where you come in at the start of the season, they don't have the right guy to hit leadoff, so we've got to try to wedge these guys into this spot and make them something that they really aren't designed to do.
Well, they have the right guy to hit leadoff.
Well, sure they do, but he's not going to do it.
The showman.
Yeah.
And that to me is, I think, a story that may be told at some point this year. And it's not that specific to Bryce Harper, but rather how the Phillies operate with their veteran players. I saw a story. I think it was Gelb put his lineup, what the opening day lineup's going to be, and that they have, Stott and Marsh batting 8-9 at the bottom. Which fine, whatever. But then, you talk about all the lefties, and, when you turn the lineup over, you're going to have 3 out of 4, or if Schwarber's leading off in that instance, and you're talking about 5 out of 6 or whatever it is, 4 out of 6, 4 out of 5. Anyway, the reasoning that he says that, he says, well, Rob Thomson doesn't want to bat either JT Realmuto or Nick Castellanos 8th out of, deference to the fact that they are veteran good players.
Sure.
And my philosophy is, I don't care. I don't care. If that's your best lineup, then make it your best lineup. Like what? Like are you suddenly going to sulk around the clubhouse because you're batting 8th and not 7th? Like what's the difference?
It leads to a larger question here. We spent some time talking about the fans' psyche coming into this season, and where are the Phillies themselves at as a clubhouse? Is there that urgency? I know that they're not really making it as much of a talking point to be like championship or bust. I get all that, but I think one of the more interesting questions coming in that sort of neighbors those conversations is, okay, there's this idea that these guys really like Rob Thomson. And I think that there's this idea out there that Rob is a player's manager and always gives in to these guys, and there's sort of a lack of accountability. And I don't think that's true. I think that there's behind the scenes probably instances where Rob has, I don't want to say laid down the law. That's not really his personality. But I don't think the guys are just doing whatever the hell they want. I don't think that he always defers to the players. I don't think it'd be fair to say that. That being said, they didn't win in 22. They didn't win in 23. Last year was kind of a disaster at the end. Like, I would have entertained that idea. I don't want these guys to hit 8th. It's kind of not right for a quality veteran player. But are you concerned at all that Rob Thomson doesn't have the ability to drop the hammer when necessary and just say, you know what? Are we allowed to curse on the joint?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't fucking care what you think.
Yeah.
It's 7th or 8th or 9th. We need to win.
Yeah.
It didn't work last year.
Well, so
no more of this.
And by
that year, can he do that?
And by that same token, my argument is, why can't you say that to Bryce Harper and say the best players on every goddamn team in this league lead off? Shohei Ohtani leads off, or Mookie Betts lead off, whatever. But either way, like, they're two superstar players. They lead off for the Dodgers, who, oh, by the way, won the World Series last year. Like, why can't Bryce Harper be that guy for the Phillies? He's the ideal of the modern era, of the modern day baseball. He's the ideal combination of on base, power, total productivity to lead off for a team.
Kyle Schwarber can change the game with one swing. So can
Bryce Harper.
His on base skills are elite. He won't steal 35 bases, but he's not going to clog them up either.
Right, correct.
It's like when you're talking about all of these different elements and, hey, what do you really want in a leadoff hitter? You're right. Now, you take him out of 3 and you feel like, all right, there's a little bit of I don't want to say deficiency, but you don't really feel that thump, that consistent thump in the middle part of that, when you go through that 3, 4, 5 window in your lineup. But you're right. I mean, if Bryce Harper, I think the shame of it is, and where I kind of keep concluding, is that they're just one hitter short in this lineup from being the lineup that we want them to be. Where you leave Harper 3, but you have somebody that profiles similarly hitting leadoff. But in this case, like I agree, man. I totally agree with you. I think that he is the guy. I think it's the one thing that really would change the feel of this lineup. And I don't expect it to happen.
No.
Now, what happens in June if they're playing 500 baseball and we're seeing the same shit from this offense? Does the volume on that conversation start to turn up a little bit, both internally and then externally with people like you and I?
Yeah, well, no. So the one thing that I think could eventually happen this year, and if there's one player that I am really bullish on this year, it's Bryson Stott. I really believe we're going to see a much better version of Stott this year than we did last year. I think that elbow situation was very real and hindered him a lot. And I think we're going to see a guy who can give you the 280 average, but with an ability to walk. I think that's something that you're going to see. He did do that well last year. It's one thing he did well last year.
But do you get into the spot where, like, let's say he ascends that way and there's this Bryson Stott emergence? At what point or how many games into the season do you feel comfortable saying, okay, now we're going to move him up in the order? Because we're going to have this conversation. Well, he's really comfortable hitting 7th or 8th, or, he's really found his groove. Now, do we really want to force him out of that and wedge him into the leadoff spot? What are the
I think it would really – the answer to that question, Bob, is – dependent upon what the other guys are doing, in all honesty, and how the Phillies are playing. Because if he's hitting 8th, the lineup is producing, right? You're not going to make a change. You don't make a change if it's working. But if he's like one or two guys that's producing and everybody else is kind of languishing a little bit, well, then you make that change and you give it a shot. Say, listen, what we've been doing isn't working. Then we go to Bryson Stott. So I think that is still an option that exists down the line this season for the Phillies, and I think it may eventually get to that point. But it's certainly not going to be something that they do first 6 weeks of the season. No. The
other thing that is a little bit strange, and I don't know if last season Kyle Schwarber's, certainly his approach changed, his game plan at the plate changed. And I'm not saying that Kyle Schwarber all of a sudden is going to be lights out against left-handers for the remainder of his career. But you talk about rotating guys at the top of the lineup between Turner and Schwarber. The thing that I don't understand more than anything else is Kyle Schwarber last year performed extraordinarily well against left-handed pitching. He had 300 against lefties last year. His on-base percentage was over 400. He had an 898 OPS against lefties last year. Now, granted, Trey Turner hit 324 against lefties, but his on-base percentage was only 363. It was 40 points lower than Kyle Schwarber's.
I guess the thought process is, and this is me trying to play because I'm in agreement with you. This is me trying to play the devil's advocate in this. Turner, let's use last year's numbers as our predictor going forward. If Turner's going to get on base at 363, then I'm good with Trey Turner as a leadoff hitter. And in that case, putting Schwarber down into a more run-producing spot in the lineup will elongate the lineup.
So you would sacrifice a 400 on base percent, again, just using last season as a predictor, and that can make us like idiots very quickly.
Yeah.
But you would sacrifice a 408 or 407 on base percentage in exchange for 363 to get Schwarber's power back behind Bryce Harper somewhere in the lineup.
Yeah, I would, because to me, a leadoff hitter, your best leadoff hitters on base are 350 and up. Mm-hmm. Below 350 to me is not worth crowing about. 350 is good. 360, 365, 370. Now we're talking, okay, that's really good. And if you're going, of course, over 400 is elite. But I still think Schwarber can give you that. But if he's going to hit that home, if you're going to get on base 36% of the time, and Schwarber's going to come up with somebody on base and get that home run, I think that there is a marginal positive difference for the team. So if in that vein, I'm okay with it. But that's telling me that Trey Turner is going to get on base at a 363 clip against lefties, which I'm not convinced is something that's going to happen this year doing it full time.
Right. Okay. All right. I think we've sufficiently done the lineup thing, right? The top thing. And I'm sure that there's a lot more to talk about with this lineup, and I can't wait to get some games under our belts here so we have some data points to actually look at and break down and discuss. The other big roster development here, and we'll get to Cody Clemens and the, all the other moves here shortly. But the other big thing that we just have to talk about again, and I'm super excited to do this, is Taijuan Walker is on this roster. And not only is he on the roster, he's going to be in the starting rotation. He's going to start the 6th game of the year, which is the finale against the Rockies, which will take place next Thursday afternoon at 1:05. And I say that sort of as a public service announcement for those of you that are thinking about going to a game down there next week. Just know your probable pitchers, I guess. And I don't want to be mean here, but we got to also keep it real, as they say. I'm going to just say something that hasn't been said before a million times. We know the Taijuan Walker deal here, right? And there's nothing that I can say that would blow you away, I guess. But Taijuan Walker's final 10 starts last season, 10 starts. You know the Phillies' record in those games?
0-10.
That would be 0-10. And I would just offer you this. We talk about the Phillies' inconsistencies down the stretch last year, and there were plenty, and a lot of it was offensively focused. And I'm not going to pin Taijuan Walker's lack of performance as the sole reason that the Phillies struggled. But if you would have gotten something even league average in there that would have won 30%, 3 of those games, Phillies are a 98-win team. Phillies go just 500 in that spot, and they're a 100-win team. And you say, well, who cares? Because of the end result. And Taijuan Walker didn't finish or figure into that end result because he wasn't a factor against the Mets. True enough. But for a team that was really struggling to find its footing and find some semblance of momentum going into October, I think putting that guy out there once every 5 days really hurts your ability to do that and find your footing and get on a roll. And when you show up to the park going oh God, we got to do this today, which, I'm sure all those guys really like Taijuan Walker, but they're in your heart of hearts, deep down inside, probably not winning this game today because this guy's not going to give us a shot. So now here we are again to start the season doing this. I'm not necessarily worried about the 3 or 4 starts that he might have to make in place of Ranger Suarez in April. Maybe I am. But the bigger problem is that you just look at it. You said it to me before the show started. His numbers this spring are worse than what they were last year. His final of 14 appearances last season, he had an 8.05 ERA. Opponents hit 323 against him with a 3. You just talked about on-base percentage being elite. 391 on-base percentage opposing hitters had against him in his final 14 appearances with a 1.012 OPS. I know he's making $18 million this year. I know he's making $18 in 2026. I get it. I cannot believe we are doing this again. I just can't. And then what he did against the Yankees 2 times ago to wrap up spring, I know he had some momentum. terrible against the Yankees. He was horrible to start the game in the first 2 innings yesterday. And kudos to him, I guess, for getting through the third and fourth. Stop me if you've heard that before. Well, he was terrible in those first 2 innings. He absolutely buried the team, but he did give the team an extra 2 innings of scoreless baseball after they were bludgeoned to death early on. Well, I mean, dude.
It's the same story.
And I'm not going to sit here in any way, shape, or form call the Phillies cheap. They're not cheap. Look at the payroll numbers. Spend a lot of money. This team spends a lot of money. They're seriously doing this again? You seriously couldn't find a way to not do this? Come on.
Yeah, and there are ways to not do this. There legitimately are ways to not do this. And the fact that they're going to do this again is absolutely, I'm beside myself. I really am. And I looked at the four.
Egg on my face. It's April 30th, and he takes the ball 3 times, and he gives you that run of games that he gave you in, I think, late June, early July of 23, where like he had 5 or 6 starts where he was like one of the best starters in baseball for 6 weeks. Please go ahead. And then a month from now, I'll be like, man, Taiwan, brother, you're the man. And I was totally wrong. But it's not even about what's going to happen. It's like that we're at this point that it's going to be allowed to happen.
I looked at the games that he's probably going to start, and he is going to start against the Rockies, who are maybe the worst team in baseball, if not the second worst. The Marlins are right there with him. He's going to probably get a start against the Marlins later in the month. And in between, he's going to have to pitch in Atlanta and here at home against the Giants. 3 of those 4 starts at Citizens Bank Park. Let's just say 4 starts. That's what I'm kind of gauging it on based off of what Dombrowski said about how much time
that helps him, by the way.
Ranger gets out. I don't. That's my point. It doesn't help him. It doesn't. He'd be better off starting all 4 games on the road.
Yeah.
Seriously. It doesn't help him because he's got to be so good to not. Every mistake pitch he throws is going to be under a harsh spotlight. And the crowd has zero patience for it. And you're putting him in a bad spot. You're putting him in a tough position that he has to deal with that added pressure when he's pitching games that you want him to win, even against bad teams. I just look at it and say the Phillies would have been better off going with a Kyle Tyler or freaking Tyler Phillips. For God's sake, I know they waived him, right? Whatever. But
I'm asking them to do though is swallow $36 million and just say like, okay.
But Bob, they were this close to doing it last year.
Yeah. They
were this close to saying this is a sunk cost. And then they figured out a way to kind of keep him. And look, okay, fine. I had zero problem bringing him into spring training. Who knows? Pitchers get hurt on other teams. Somebody might get desperate. You can move Taiwan Walker, whatever, if he's pitching well in the spring. But he didn't even pitch that great in the spring. I know it started okay, and the guy threw 93 miles per hour in spring when last year he was throwing 88. That's nice. But did you really, really look at what he did? Do you think he had more walks or more home runs allowed in spring training?
Well, I'm going to go home runs just because it's such a ridiculous question.
It was even. It was even. 6 walks, 6 home runs in 17 innings. He gave up 6 home runs in 17 innings. He gave up 25 hits. And he only struck out 8. 7.41 ERA, 1.824 WHIP. I know it's spring training. We shouldn't be looking too deep into these numbers. I get it.
Well, listen, look, I'm not a spring training stat guy, but you don't get the benefit of the doubt when in the second half in 9 games, 5 starts last year, he had a 9.68 ERA. Like, you don't get he's working out some bugs. Like, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. You get this. You get this conversation when you're coming off of that type of year and you have that type of spring.
Yeah.
I mean, look, in fairness, talking about home road, I mean, look, he was actually much better at home, and I say that pretty loosely, but he had a 8.41 ERA on the road in 8 games last year and a 6.14 ERA at home in 11 games. So, I mean, it is like 2.5 home runs per 9, but it's not good. And I just look at it, and some of the you got to get through the first inning. And we talk about how much he struggles and has struggled since he's been here in the first inning. I mean, he had a 6.60 ERA last season in the first, and that was coming off of a historically bad 2023, where, I mean, he was just so bad in the first inning that the numbers were incomprehensible. But, I mean, opponents hit 312 against him last year in the first inning with a 947 OPS. It's like, and we're going to do this, and maybe he gets through the Marlins and the Rockies of the world, and he gets blown up by the Braves, and that's okay. And he does his job enough, maybe. But
look,
crazy to me that we're doing this.
Hey, Bob, if we get through these four, let's say he gets 4 starts. If we get through 4 starts and he has an ERA of 5, are you saying, okay, fine, we survived it? Right? Yeah. Like, I mean, that's really what, like, you're accepting of a 5 ERA. Like saying, all right, got by that.
There's like a larger conversation to be had here. Like, if you go back to 2013, you know, where the wheels started to fall off the bus for the Phillies, and I'll give them 2012. They were injured. They still played 500 baseball. It was just kind of like a strange year. I think that we felt like in 2012, like maybe this team is about to lose it, but there was still some optimism in 2013 that there was enough there. The Howards and the Utleys of the world would power you back. And it never happened. 2013 on, here you go. Win totals by year: 73, 73, 63, 71, 66. And then Gabe Kapler shows up in 18. They win 80 games, 81. Then they go 28 and 32. And then, you know, we get into this more modern, recent string of seasons where they've been successful. And I point to that to say, are people as excited about the Phillies this season as they've been in years past? It doesn't feel like that to me. I don't think that Sports Talk Radio and Twitter/X are the absolute end-all be-all in terms of evaluating that. But even conversations I've had with my own friends, there's like a little bit of like, I'm excited because I love the Phillies and they're coming back and it's almost springtime and I'm going to go down and sure, I'll watch them at night. It's not that I'm not in, but I'm not as amped up about it as I've been in years past. And I think that a lot of people do really feel like that. And we've talked about that, you know, in our final Crossed Up episodes as well. But when you really try to hammer down why, I do think it's a lot about the same core players, the same concerns about these guys offensively and their approach. I think that's a big part of it. And obviously the disappointment at the end of 23 and 24 specifically is a big part of it. But a little part of it, I think, is the fact that we're doing this conversation. We're doing Taijuan Walker. Like, if you're the Phillies, right, like, you could win 93 games this year, and that's exactly how many games I think they're going to win. And I think that this is a very good team, and I believe that they're going to be in the mix in the National League. I think all of those things. But there is a little bit of a part of me, when you tie those other points that I made together, and then you add into the fact that you're giving this fan base Taijuan Walker. You're saying, hey, fans, here's Taijuan Walker. We didn't do much this offseason to upgrade this team. You've been very disappointed, and we're going to give you Taijuan Walker and the same lineup and the same look. Like, I can see the psychology of forgetting how bad it could be. Like, I feel like this fan base can be a little bit spoiled at times. Like, that might be a clip. But, like, I we're literally, you know, just plotting into the year where, like, a team might win 92 games, and we're like, I'm not even excited. Like, could you imagine telling your 2015 self that? Could you imagine looking at this roster and the prospects that this team has and what it could accomplish this year and being not excited about it? But at the same time, in the same breath, like, I kind of get it.
Yeah, I get it a little bit. I mean, I'm not a fan of, you know, trophy culture, where if you don't get the trophy, it's a failure. Like,
that's a problem. That's a societal thing, man. That's not
it is
city or baseball or it's.
Well, yeah, but we endure it a lot here because of how much sports matters in Philadelphia, right? So unless you win that championship, it's a failure.
Okay. Can I push back on that real quick?
Go ahead.
I don't think you can evaluate the success or failure of a team specifically most of the time if they don't win a championship at the onset of a year. Like, I don't think that that's fair. I do think that situationally you can. Like, if the 2024 Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl, that would have been a failure. That was a better team. They had a chance. The 23 Phillies not winning the World Series, that was a failure. And what I would say, even in addition to that, is that I don't think that the 2024 Phillies were a failure because they didn't win the World Series, them specifically in that situation. But I do think if you zoom out and you take 22 through 25, or 22 through 26, a 5-year run, this team, this core doesn't win. I do think you can zoom out and say, over those 5 years, they should have won one, and that is a failure.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. Like I need to look at things more in an era of a group of players, right? And sit there and say, how did that team do? And if they win one at some point, well, then you can't sit there and be Debbie Downer about a team. I mean, it's not easy to win, but if you are a contender for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, well, you got to win one in there. You got to win at least one in there, right? If you're not a contender, it is what it is, and you just kind of say, okay, well, our time will come eventually. But once you hit contender status, however long your window's open, you can't sit there and say, oh, well, I'm not buying in because they've let me down the last couple of years. If that was the case, every city would never be interested in their sports team. Right, because teams let you down. 31 teams let you down every year. Right, I mean, it is what it is. It's the way the championship process works. You got to get one at some point, and I'm in agreement with that. And it might be now, but that doesn't mean you when you're in the middle of it, you say, I'm out because I don't feel good about it.
That 5-year run with the Phillies, with the Utleys and Howards and all of that. I mean, look, 09, 10, and 11 were huge disappointments. But again, you zoom out, you say, well, we have 08. It could have been more, probably should have been more, but at least they had 08. And so now all those guys are revered for all eternity. They didn't win in 08. We look at this in a completely different way.
Correct.
Interesting. This is how much I think our sports culture, maybe at a higher scale, but certainly in Philadelphia, has evolved over time. Let me give you another 5-year run, but this in the NFL. Let me tell you if you'd be interested in this resume of games, this block of games. And I think you'll know what I'm pointing to once I get through it. 5, 10, and 1. 7 and 8. 10 and 6. 11 and 5. 10 and 6. That's it. In each of those 5 seasons, not a single playoff win. Is that a memorable stretch? Is that a stretch by a team or a franchise that you would think would be celebrated 30 years later?
That's the Buddy Ryan era, correct?
Buddy Ryan Eagles.
Yeah.
And, people could take it for what it was worth. Not to say that it wasn't frustrating as hell to lose a game in the fog in Chicago or to see Randall get hurt against Green Bay when you have an all-time defense. But, that huge disappointment. And that's one of the more celebrated teams and stretches of this city's sports history. We would never go for that now. Never go for that. How about if I gave you 9 and 8, 14 and 3, 11 and 5, 14 and 3? If I give you that stretch of 4 years, and then with 2 Super Bowls mixed in, prior to winning that last season, we're going to fire the coach. It's crazy.
It is.
It's time, man. I don't know if it's a Twitter thing, if it's we have streaming services and our attention is too diluted, and if we don't get perfection, we have zero tolerance for it. I don't know what it is, but it's different now. It is.
It is.
I don't hear, oh, buddy, you shoved it up the Cowboys. Yeah, I don't want to hear that.
No. But it was different back then. It really was. As somebody who grew up in that era, it was a different mentality back then than it is now. And maybe that's why, and maybe I'm an old guy, right? And that's what it is. Like, I look at each season as opportunity. I don't go into each season looking at a team and saying, yeah, but last year, or yeah, but the last 2 years, yeah, but the last 3, whatever.
Yeah, like, what are you going to do? Not watch the Phillies this year because they didn't play well against the Mets for 3 days in October last season? Like,
Yeah, so that's
all that said. Like, I do get it. Like, I get that. Like,
yeah.
Last year everyone was like, all right, they blew it last year, but this team's really good, and they said they're going to start fast, and then they did, and everyone bought in, and like, I get that this. I totally get the disappointment, and I get the hangover element of it. I understand all of it, but I do think that everyone kind of needs to check themselves a little bit going into the season and be like, yo, you have a team that odds makers are sitting here and saying, like, should probably win 92 games.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And so I can't get behind the wait till October. And then I'll tune in kind of thing. I can't get behind that.
Because if you listen to our show and that's the worst. It really is the worst. And I do think that it's different. Maybe this is my own bias. I think that the NBA, if you're a Sixers fan, you're like, call me in April. Yeah, I get it. I do. And because the season is largely, again, people may disagree with me. I think that the season's largely useless. I think it's not relevant. I don't think that the teams play in a regular season like it matters. So why would I, as a fan, act like it matters? I don't think you can do that in baseball. I just don't. I think that if you really if you're a call me in October guy, you don't like baseball. You just don't.
Right.
You know that checking guys' hot streaks and watching the stats, rise up and fall off and the day-to-day grind of it. That's what makes the game what it is. That's the attraction to it. And if you're willing to simulate it like it's a Sega game in the early 90s just to get to the end result, oh, sorry. You just don't. You can be honest about it. Just say, I like the Phillies in the way that Dancing on My Own comes on in October, and I want to go to the bars and party. I don't like them in the way that I actually give a shit about the sport.
Right.
That doesn't mean, though, that 3 weeks into the season, if we see that Nick Castellanos chasing sliders in the opposite batter's box, that we can't say, holy we're doing this again? We're doing Taijuan Walker again? We're doing no real true closer again? Doesn't mean that you can't be frustrated with the things that might be recurring issues, but
yes, fair enough. Couple more roster things. These are kind of quick hitters. Phillies surprised everybody. We were all wrong, and you, Tim Kelly at On Pattison, every beat writer who made their lineup or roster projections, Matt Gelb, Todd Zalecki, Scott Lauber, everybody who did them, we're all wrong. Cody Clemens made the roster. Everybody had him being traded because he just is a square peg in a round hole. Certainly a major league hitter, certainly a valuable bench guy, but because the Phillies are so damn left-handed, it just didn't seem like a fit, and yet he makes the roster ahead of other guys. Now, this might be temporary, with Weston Wilson probably due back by the end of April, and then we'll see where things are if somebody else is hurt. So to me, it's like the Phillies punted, Bob. It was like they said, you know what, that we're going to worry about the last guy on the bench a month from now and see where we're at. Is somebody else hurt? Whatever the case might be. We like Cody Clemens enough as a hitter, even though he's never going to play, to just kind of keep him, and let's see what happens for the first month of the season.
Well, I don't want to be mean here, but this is like punting on 4th and 18. It's not punting on 4th and 2. Your other option was Buddy Kennedy. And look, local guy, good story. Not saying he doesn't have something. I think that there is a trade market for him. I know the Phillies are somewhat optimistic that they can find a partner. Okay. But he just didn't perform very well, and Cody Clemens did, and I'm okay. They're way too left-handed, and it is not a fit. But one guy performed at a pretty high level this spring and has had moments with this team in recent years, and the other guy didn't. And so I think you're able to punt in this situation. It's not like you had two guys playing the same way or had the same value, and you made a weird decision. You just say, all right, let's give ourselves a couple weeks and see what happens here.
Yeah, I mean, they did have one other option, although it was a non-roster player, and that was Christian Arroyo, who's got major league experience, had a really good spring, basically plays the same positions that Cody Clemens plays. Clemens maybe has slightly more experience in left field than Arroyo does. But the fact is Arroyo's right-handed, and maybe you could have gone that route instead. And the Phillies chose not to. Phillies chose to. They got him down in the minors.
Even up Wilson for, if everything stays the same, Wilson for Clemens. Is that what happens here, or
is there? Do you see another angle? I don't. I mean, the only other thing I could see is, and I can't. I can't even see that.
It's going to be Johan Rojas. It's not like Johan Rojas is going to hit enough to they need him.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You don't have somebody else who can play center field. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You don't really have another center fielder. So
I know Edmundo Sosa out in center.
yeah, unless that's it. I mean, that's the only other option that you would have, and it's not a good one. So so there's that, and then there's the back of the bullpen where the Phillies brought all these people in, pitched a lot of these guys, a lot of innings in spring training, had a lot of good things to say about several of them. It made you start to think, okay, the Devin Sweets, the Nabil Krismats, the Kyle Tylers of the world. These guys, had an opportunity to maybe potentially get this last spot, and then out of the blue, they go and acquire Carlos Hernandez from the Kansas City Royals, Venezuelan pitcher, 28 years old. Doesn't really have a great track record. He had one season back in 21 where he was solid, but he was kind of like a swingman. He started 11 games and relieved in the other 13. 86 innings, 1.28 WHIP, 3.68 ERA was decent. 22 and 23, not very good years at all. 22 was disaster. 23 was better, but not great. ERA plus.
This is a great scouting report and continue, but the whole thing that you need to know here is he's walked 125 batters and 256 career innings.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. That's the story.
Yeah, it's all over the place. Well, I look at ERA plus, right, Bob? His career ERA plus is 89. Mm-hmm. That's 11% below league average.
Yep.
I don't know.
Okay, last year though, right? 120.
Well, it was only but it was only 30 innings. Yeah. Right? It was only 30 innings. So he did a better job of missing bats in 30 innings last year. Still walked 16 guys in 30 innings. That's high. Yeah. It's very high. Doesn't have wipeout stuff either. Like his strikeout rate career, 7.9 strikeouts per 9. That's low for a reliever. So I don't know. Like I looked at that and said, what do you see here? What did the Phillies identify here in this guy that they felt that they couldn't get out of who they already had, in camp?
That's fair. And if you want to pivot out and start talking about where this team slots in, look, there are concerns here. Like if I'm telling you that I think they might win 93 games, I just kind of trust the starting rotation. I think that the Suarez thing's a little bit concerning, and that would change the math on it a little bit. But I think that you stack up those first four guys, and it's about as good as it gets. And you get Suarez mixed into it, and if he stays reasonably healthy, and then with Painter coming, I believe in that. And I think that there's enough there offensively that complements it where they're still a very good team. But if you want to pick this apart and get negative, you look at the fact that you will get Taijuan Walker in a semi-meaningful capacity, at least early on. This bullpen, to me, on paper, we sat here this time last year, even after that blow-up early in the season. I said, I think that this is one of the best bullpens in Major League Baseball. I don't know that right now. I don't feel like that. I don't think they're in the top 5 group. I think that they have some pieces and some guys that I like. But the back end, like the front end of that bullpen, I should say, a lot of question marks there right now. Like a lot of question marks. And, if Jose Alvarado carries over his march into the season, that changes the math a little bit. But, again, I need to see it. So there's, you throw up all the lineup inconsistencies and the hot and cold thing. And do you really trust Castellanos? And what's Turner going to do? You could go right down the list and be like, oof, this feels like a big step back, and it's going to be 84 wins, and they'll be competitive and be in striking distance at the end. But this isn't a special team. If you're there, okay, I can't tell you that that's insane.
Yeah, no. I was just a little surprised. I thought I think that this bullpen is okay. I think Alvarado is going to be better than last year. I think Romano will be healthy. If he's healthy, will be good. I do worry a little bit about Strom. I like Kerkering. I think Kerkering will be better. But beyond that, like you said, I don't love the rest of the bullpen. Joe Ross is...
Yeah, so you go Ruiz, Ross...
Yeah. Tanner Banks.
Tanner Banks, who last year was, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not a super inspiring group. In fact, like of all the criticisms that I have of the Phillies coming in, it's this. It's that, okay, you didn't want to go out and sign some megastar. Like that's totally reasonable. Where you're at payroll, you don't want to jam yourself up for future years. You want to create flexibility. Okay. You could have done more here.
Yes.
The passive offseason, I have no issue with in a big picture way. This bullpen, I felt like was not approached the way it should have been. Like you could have done a much, much, much more here. And I think that it's going to show up early on. I do. I think it's going to be a problem in April.
And here's the one thing that I'm going to throw back at you on this, because I agree. I don't think they did enough with the bullpen, but I'm trying to justify. I've been sitting around thinking, well, why would they do it this way? Aside from the money situation, you don't want to sign anybody to a 3-year, 4-year deal, big money, and you're over that top apron to begin with. I get it, but why wouldn't you? So let's say we get to June, Bob, Father's Day week. Let's say roughly. This is my prediction when Andrew Painter's going to come up, and Painter's here. Now let's say your starters are healthy.
Yep.
Okay. Take Walker out of the equation, but let Wheeler, Sanchez, Nola, Luzardo, Suarez, they're all healthy. Okay. It's time for Andrew Painter. What happens?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is Ranger Suarez. Ranger can give us multiple innings, and it's not just we can be a little bit thinner out there because he can cover multiple innings, and he has that versatility to him, and all of that, and that's great. I'll just say this again. I pointed this out, I think, on Crossed Up the last show. Ranger Suarez free agent at the end of the year. I don't think you or I think that the Phillies are going to re-sign him. How excited is Ranger Suarez going to be in a contract here, going to the bullpen to be a swingman, versatility guy, cover holes in the pen when we're a little bit short? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of that justifies this approach.
Okay,
but I think that's a gamble in as much as anything else, right? I mean, I think that's just as big a gamble as anything. I don't understand it. It's the one thing that I've been really perplexed.
The past couple of years, and be like, well, look, they have a veteran team and they're going to be contenders. And if they get to July and they know they have a deficiency, they're going to go out and address it because they have to win a championship with this group. And there's nothing that has happened at the end of July in recent years that tells me that they're going to do that or that the plan is to do that. I don't think they're going to go out and get the best reliever on the market if this is a deficiency that's keeping them back. I think they're going to go out and get a guy, and you'll say, all right, I guess. I guess show me otherwise. There's no reason to think that that's going to be any different.
Right. All right. Well, we sound a little despondent, Bob. We sound a little down about this team.
I think this is a good, healthy conversation. I'm telling you why you should feel good about them. I'm telling you why you might not want to.
Well, so why don't we lead that into our final segment here and kind of get into our predictions? Because I think that, we're probably both a step down from where we were a year ago with this team, but not so far down that we're packing in the season on March 25th. So where do you think you are with the Phillies for this year, and how do you project it out?
Oh, well, as it pertains to the Phillies specifically, I said 93. I think that's where I'm at. I'm skewing more positive than maybe I ought to. Like I said, I do see some variance. The possibility for some pretty big variance here. But I just think that there's enough here. I think that these guys don't deserve the benefit of the doubt, but I'm kind of just still have this magnetic pull to they're going to figure it out. And I just like the rotation. I think the rotation gives you an opportunity to win when Ranger Suarez is healthy pretty much every time. I don't think you ever go into a game other than maybe if you're throwing Ranger Suarez against Paul Skeens. Obviously there's exceptions. I think most nights you look at the probable pitchers and say to yourself, I see the Phillies winning tonight. And I just think that adds up to somewhere over 90 wins. Where does that put them in the division? I think second. I don't think here you go, bold take, hot take. I don't think 3 NL East teams make the playoffs this year. I think only 2.
Interesting.
And I'm gonna knock your socks off here. I think it's the Mets that win the division. I think the Braves have a year of like figuring it out. I know Strider's, I know, I get it, but
Yeah.
I think we're going Mets, Phillies, Braves in the East.
Interesting. I'm the other way around. I'm at 91 wins for the Phillies. Only because, and I'm taking a step back 4 games off of where they finished last year, just because I think the NL East is the best division best division as far as 4 teams, right? You got the Marlins are an absolute joke, but beyond that, Phillies, Braves, and Mets are 3 of the, in my mind, 6 best teams in baseball.
Yeah.
And I think the Washington Nationals are a really under the radar, good young team that they're going to be good. They're coming, right? And so I think the Nationals are going to be a tough out when you play them in the regular season. I don't mean in the playoffs. They're going to be a tough team to beat. So I think all these teams playing each other, ultimately, I think the numbers are going to come down for everybody. I don't think you're going to see somebody win this division at 98, 99 wins. I think that it's probably a 92, 93 wins you this division. I have the Phillies in second. I do have Atlanta first. I was skeptical a little bit about that. I was debating between the Phillies and the Braves, but I went with the Braves because ultimately I think by midseason they're healthy and rolling. I'm not sure what Strider's going to look like when he comes back. I'm not sure how well Acuna is going to look coming back, but I think they're going to be fine. And so I'm going Braves 1, Phillies 2, Mets 3. I do have all 3 making the playoffs, but I do think that's the order, and it's because I don't like the Mets pitching. I just don't.
Yeah, and I hear you on, they win 95 last year, so they obviously have to come back a little bit because we don't think this team is as good, number 1. Number 2, the division is a little bit better. I think where I kind of got myself to 93, we're in the same neighborhood. We're sort of splitting hairs here a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think where I landed is the stat that I gave you earlier on. Now, Taijuan Walker is now going to start games, and that probably should be accounted for in my prediction. But I said 93 this offseason, sort of accounting for the fact that the Phillies largely played the last 3 months of the season. I know they were playing at a historical pace early on, so I guess you could make this argument. But I felt like the last 3 months they were better than they played. And I also think that, going 0-10 because someone gave you no chance when they were starting games should be accounted for. I kind of thought that the 2024 Phillies were a 100 to 102 win baseball team that just played with no urgency at the end of the season and basically forfeited games at points with Taijuan Walker on the mound. So I look at them as a 100, 102 win team, and I think that this team's probably like 7 to 8 games worse. And so that's kind of how I get to that number. But again, I recognize that they're not going to have the start that they had through, the third week of May, a year ago. So we'll see what happens. I think that you and I are both fairly aligned here, though. You have them as a second place team. You have them in the playoff mix. How far do you want to go with predictions? I think maybe we go league wide on Friday just for the sake of time here.
Yeah.
But if you want to go into how far do you have this team going?
I think the Phillies can reach the NLCS. I do not have them going to the World Series.
I do not have the Phillies going to the World Series either. I think that they get to the DS and they're ousted. I think that this is it in a lot of ways for this group.
Yeah. I think they can get to the NLCS. Yeah. It really depends on who they match up with in the second round, to me. The Phillies...
I don't think that the Phillies... here you go. I don't think that the Phillies are going to get by the Braves in a playoff series this time. If that were to happen, I'm telling you, I'll have Atlanta in. But I just don't think that this team is good enough to do this again to the Braves. And look, I know you look at everyone and well, how do you bet against the Dodgers? I'm not going to pick the Phillies to beat the Dodgers. I'm not going to do it. If they can do it, great. But I'm not picking that.
Yeah. So I have them losing the NLCS this year. So. I'll give you one hot take, though.
All right. I was going to do all my hot takes next time, but go ahead.
I'll give you one hot take.
Yeah.
The 2026 starting outfield for the Phillies is 3 completely different players than the 2025 starting outfield for the Phillies.
I completely agree.
All 3.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you.
So.
Thought it should have been this year.
Yeah. One last thing, Bob, just around the league. Do do you think Major League Baseball should have a little bit of a black eye? And part of it is not their fault. Obviously, you can't do anything about natural disasters. But is it a little bit of a black eye that they have two teams this year playing in minor league parks, and the situations are really bad? Like I looked at the thing in Oakland Oakland. I can just keep saying that. The Athletics in Sacramento, where they're worried that the turf is so bad there that they had to go and get like this backup turf that they have ready to go in because they feel like it's going to be shoddy by mid-April and it's not going to be major league quality. And so they're going to have all kinds of turf issues. And then you got the Rays playing in Steinbrenner Field, and the Yankees are giving them no help at all, like with rebranding. And they're putting up all these plastic Rays signs up and everything. It's going to look really bad. That ballpark plays really small as it is. And then secondarily, now you got to play in Florida in the dead of the summer outdoors. I know they front-loaded that schedule with a lot of home games. Yeah. They tried, but there's going to be scheduling fiascos all over the place, I think. Like, couldn't they have come up with something better than this?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the question. What is the alternative, especially as it pertains to Tampa? What do you do? It's not a great look. I will say we survived the baseball COVID thing. That was weird. It was different, and we're okay after a season, and you get back to normal. I guess the only other thing I can even think about in recent years in the NFL was the Vikings, I want to say in 2015 played at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah.
On campus outdoors. That was sort of a disaster. I believe that there was a guy's name, Blair, the kicker. It was like a 21-yard field goal to beat the Seahawks, and it was like a bowling ball, and he missed it. So, I mean, we've seen teams in temporary homes before in other leagues, but no, it's not a good thing at all, and it's going to feel cheap and not worthy of the Major League Baseball product and all of that. Yeah, I think that's a valid concern. I just don't know. I don't know propose an alternative. You can't put them on the road for 162. So,
well, what you could have done is you could have given them a temporary home where there is a Major League caliber stadium. It might not be in their town. Right? I mean, A's are vagabonds. The fact that they allowed it to go to Sacramento, where they're going to be for 3 years playing in a minor league park.
Baseball probably could have stepped in and did something about that.
They could have done that. They could have done something about that. The Rays, you didn't really have an option. But look, the Rays don't draw in Tampa as it is. Yeah. So what harm would it have been to have them play in another major league town with a big stadium that could have been converted into baseball?
Well, what do? You put them in Miami?
Well, I don't know. Maybe not Miami. Maybe you put them in New Orleans, or maybe you put them in Nashville, where you're thinking about expanding to, right?
I think if you had, I don't know the logistics or the operational side of this. I think if you had 2 years to do it, like say it was what had occurred, and you're looking at the 26 season and you didn't have a viable solution, then I think that you have enough time and place where you could do that. I just don't know if you can open up another city where nobody's anticipating that and saying like, hey, you're going to house this team. That's tough. But I don't know.
Yeah. Like I looked at it and said, you're thinking about expanding. If you're thinking about expanding, what better way to do a test run than to have a one season
the National Rays
play there and see how the crowd takes to it. Right. I mean, that's what I would have done, but that's just me. Yeah. Anyway, that was my one last thing for today.
Very good. All right. Well, now listen, I got to be honest with you. Where do I point people to make sure? Listen, we're on the old X app.
First of all, here's the easiest thing. We have it scrolling on the bottom of the screen, so you can read it, Bob. Right? If you want to do it, you can just say where they can find us on YouTube. Right? If you want to wait, it'll scroll back. It's a little slow scroll.
You can never miss a show. Well, when you go to YouTube.com. /Phightin Words. Is that at Phightin Words? You need the little @ symbol in there, and then you can subscribe to Phightin Words on YouTube and click the thumbs up. And also get us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. And we're still on Twitter. And if you were following the Crossed Up Show account, it's just been changed over, but it's now @Phightin Podcast. Again, PH on Phightin. And we'll have show updates for you and links to everything on there as well.
Great.
All right.
You did good. That's right. So that's it. That's the first Phightin Words podcast, first episode of Phightin Words. We got through it. We did good.
Very
We did
exciting. We will be back on Friday after the Phillies opening day game on Thursday afternoon against the Washington Nationals, and we'll talk to you then.